What if the universe knocked on your bedroom door and asked you a question no human should ever have to answer? What if you were given a button, a single, silent choice? Press it and humanity survives. Refuse, and the world ends without pain, without fire, without warning. Just silence. Permanent silence. And the terrifying part is not the aliens. The terrifying part is looking at the world, at grief, cruelty, loneliness, and heartbreak, and wondering if it deserves to continue. Tonight's story is not about science fiction. It's about survival. It's about a boy crushed by loss, haunted by love, and forced to decide whether existence itself is worth saving. This is a story about depression, connection, and the fragile rebellion of choosing to live when everything inside you says stop. This is not just a book summary. This is a question disguised as a story. And by the end, that question might belong to you. Welcome to English Bookshelf. And this is We Are the Ants. Imagine being told that the fate of the entire human race rests in your hands. And your first thought is not heroism, not fear, but a quiet, exhausted question. Why should I save them? The story begins in the dark. A teenage boy lies frozen in his bed, staring at the ceiling as a blinding white light fills the room. He cannot move. He cannot scream. The air feels heavy, thick, unreal. Shadowy figures stand around him, studying him like a specimen instead of a person. This is not the first time it has happened. It will not be the last. His name is Henry Denton, and he has been abducted by aliens more times than he can count. But this story is not about aliens. It is about pain. It is about grief. It is about the terrifying weight of being alive. Henry is 17 years old, and his life already feels like it has ended. His boyfriend Jesse died in a car accident, and the loss carved a hole inside Henry that refuses to close. Jesse was not just a relationship, he was a lifeline. He was laughter in quiet moments, warmth in cold days, the proof that Henry could be loved in a world that often feels hostile. Now Jesse is gone, and every memory feels like a knife wrapped in nostalgia. Henry walks through school hallways like a ghost wearing a human face. People talk around him, but their voices sound distant, like echoes underwater. He is alive, but he is not living. At home, the air is just as suffocating. His mother is drowning in her own exhaustion, stretched thin by work and worry. His older brother Charlie is a storm waiting to explode. Charlie's anger is violent and unpredictable, and Henry has learned the geography of fear inside his own house. Every creak of the floorboards feels like a warning. Every raised voice feels like a threat. Home is supposed to be safety, but for Henry, it is a place where survival requires silence. And then the universe makes a cruel joke. During one abduction, the aliens finally explain why they keep coming back. They're not experimenting on him. They're not curious tourists. They are messengers. Earth is approaching a catastrophic end, a cosmic event that will erase humanity completely. Extinction is no longer a distant possibility. It is a scheduled appointment. But Henry has been chosen to intervene. In 144 days, he will be given a button. If he presses it, the world survives. If he refuses, everything ends quietly, permanently, without ceremony. The aliens speak in calm, detached voices. To them, this is logistics, probability, mathematics. To Henry, it is absurd. Because how do you ask a broken teenager to decide the fate of a species? The aliens return him to his bed as if nothing happened. Morning arrives. The sun shines. School buses run on schedule. Teachers assign homework. The world continues with its routine indifference, unaware that it is balancing on the edge of oblivion. Henry carries the knowledge like a secret bomb ticking in his chest. Every conversation feels fake. Every plan for the future sounds like a lie. His classmates argue about prom and college applications, while Henry wonders if humanity deserves another chance to exist. And disturbingly, he is not sure it does. Grief has changed the way he sees the world. He notices cruelty everywhere, casual insults, thoughtless violence, the way people hurt each other for entertainment. He remembers Charlie's fists. He remembers the emptiness of Jesse's funeral. He remembers standing in a room full of people pretending to understand loss while feeling completely alone. Some nights, he believes extinction might be a mercy. But then there are moments that complicate his hatred. Audrey, his best friend, refuses to abandon him even when he pushes her away. She is sharp-tongued, sarcastic, fiercely protective. She drags him into conversations, into laughter, into the messy chaos of friendship. Audrey reminds him that connection still exists even in a world that feels broken. And then there is Diego Vega. Diego is new to town, carrying his own quiet sadness like invisible luggage. He's gentle in a way that surprises Henry. He listens instead of trying to fix things. He smiles like someone who understands how fragile happiness is. Their connection grows slowly, cautiously, like two people learning how to breathe after drowning. Henry is terrified of caring about him. Love feels dangerous now. Love feels like a promise the universe enjoys breaking. The aliens continue their visits, each one colder than the last. They show Henry visions of possible futures. In some timelines, humanity thrives. Cities glow with art and innovation. People fall in love, create music, build meaning out of chaos. In other timelines, humanity collapses under its own violence. War, destruction, silence. The aliens do not judge. They simply present data. But Henry is not a machine. He cannot reduce existence to statistics. Every day brings him closer to the deadline, and the weight of the decision begins to crush him. He is not deciding whether humanity deserves to survive. He is deciding whether suffering itself invalidates life, whether pain cancels beauty, whether grief erases love. His personal world mirrors the cosmic question. Charlie's violence escalates, culminating in a confrontation that leaves Henry shaken and bruised. The message is clear: even family can become an enemy. Henry feels trapped in a universe that keeps proving how cruel it can be. The temptation to do nothing grows stronger. If humanity is capable of this much harm, why preserve it? But Diego stays. Audrey stays. And in their presence, Henry glimpses a truth that no alien calculation can capture. People are contradictions. They are capable of immense cruelty and astonishing kindness in the same breath. Humanity is not a single story. It is millions of unfinished sentences colliding with each other. To erase it would be to erase every possibility. Not just the bad, but the miraculous. The final days approach quietly. There is no dramatic storm, no apocalyptic omen. The world continues its ordinary rhythm, unaware of the choice, waiting in the dark. Henry feels suspended between despair and hope, grief and love, exhaustion and stubborn survival. He realizes the aliens never truly asked him to judge humanity. They asked him to judge life itself. And life, he discovers, is not valuable because it is painless. It is valuable because it is felt, because it allows connection, because even in its worst moments, it contains the potential for meaning. The memory of Jesse does not disappear. The bruises do not vanish. The fear does not dissolve. But alongside them exists laughter, warmth, and the fragile miracle of being understood by another person. The night of the final abduction arrives without ceremony. The room fills with light one last time. The button floats in front of him, small and ordinary, holding the weight of infinity. There is no audience, no applause, no music, just a boy and a decision. Henry thinks about every reason to give up and every reason to stay. He understands, finally, that saving humanity is not about declaring it perfect. It is about accepting that imperfection is not the same as worthlessness. Existence is messy, painful, radiant, unbearable, beautiful. To choose life is not to deny suffering. It is to believe that suffering is not the final word. And so he presses the button. The universe does not explode into celebration. Morning simply arrives. Sunlight spills across his room like it always has. The world continues in its flawed, ordinary way. His problems are still there. His grief is still real. But something inside him has shifted. He chose to keep going. And in that choice lies the quiet rebellion at the heart of the story. Sometimes saving the world begins with deciding that your own life is worth staying for. The aliens disappear. The cosmic question fades. What remains is Henry stepping into an uncertain future with trembling hope. He does not have answers. He has a decision. And sometimes that is enough. Because even in a universe that feels indifferent, choosing to live is an act of defiance. And defiance is human. The morning after Henry saves the world does not feel heroic. There is no thunder in the sky. No news broadcast announcing a miracle. No cosmic whisper thanking him for his sacrifice. His alarm clock rings at the same irritating volume. The sunlight looks exactly the same. The ceiling above his bed is still cracked in the same place. The universe continues with such ordinary indifference that Henry almost wonders if it was all a hallucination. But he knows it wasn't, because the weight inside his chest has changed. It's still heavy, still bruised with grief and fear, but it's no longer empty. It's filled with something fragile and unfamiliar: intention. For the first time since Jesse died, Henry wakes up with the quiet knowledge that he chose to be here. Not by accident, not by obligation, by choice. And choice is terrifying. Saving humanity doesn't magically repair his life. Charlie is still angry. The tension in the house still crackles like exposed wires. His mother is still exhausted, moving through her days like someone running on borrowed energy. School is still full of people who don't understand him. The world he saved is the same flawed world he almost let disappear. That is the point. The book refuses the fantasy of instant healing. Henry doesn't wake up cured. Depression doesn't vanish because of a cosmic decision. Instead, the story shifts into something quieter and more difficult. Learning how to live after deciding life is worth the effort. Every interaction becomes sharper, more meaningful. When Audrey slams her locker shut and launches into one of her sarcastic monologues, Henry doesn't just hear noise anymore. He hears loyalty. He hears someone fighting to keep him tethered to the world. Audrey has always been his anchor, but he never fully acknowledged how much strength it takes to stand beside someone who is drowning. Friendship, he realizes, is not passive. It is an act of endurance. And Diego becomes the space where Henry experiments with hope. Their relationship is awkward, tender, uncertain. They talk late into the night about fear, about family, about the invisible expectations placed on boys who are told they must be strong while secretly falling apart. Diego doesn't promise Henry that life will be easy. He doesn't romanticize pain. He simply shares his own. And in that exchange, Henry discovers a strange comfort. Suffering is isolating, but shared suffering becomes connection. The novel keeps returning to this idea like a heartbeat. Pain does not disappear when acknowledged, but it becomes survivable. Charlie's presence remains the most volatile element in Henry's orbit. His brother is not a cartoon villain. He's a portrait of inherited anger, of a boy raised in an environment that taught him violence before it taught him tenderness. Every confrontation between them feels like a collision of two different survival strategies. Charlie externalizes his pain, Henry swallows his. Neither method works. Both are desperate attempts to stay afloat. When their conflict erupts again, it is messy and frightening and painfully human. Words become weapons. Old wounds reopen. But the fight reveals something Henry has avoided seeing. Charlie is not just a source of fear. He is also a casualty of the same broken system. The cycle of hurt stretches backward through their family like a chain with no clear beginning. And Henry stands at a crossroads. Saving the world was abstract. It was a button in a sterile alien room. Saving his family is intimate and complicated. It requires forgiveness that feels impossible. It requires vulnerability that feels unsafe. The novel suggests that grand heroism is easy compared to daily compassion. Pressing a button takes a second. Healing takes years. As Henry navigates these emotional minefields, memories of Jesse continue to surface. Grief in this story is not linear. It doesn't fade politely with time. It ambushes him in grocery store aisles, in empty classrooms, in songs playing through cheap speakers. Some days Jesse feels close enough to touch. Other days, he feels like a dream Henry invented to survive loneliness. But the nature of the memories begins to change. They are no longer just knives. They become maps. Jesse's laughter reminds Henry that joy once existed and therefore can exist again. Their arguments remind him that love was real, messy, imperfect, alive. Grief stops being proof that life is meaningless and becomes evidence that something meaningful happened. The pain is not a void. It is a scar. And scars, unlike voids, tell stories of survival. The absence of the aliens is almost louder than their presence. Henry waits for them to return, half expecting another cosmic demand, another impossible choice. But the silence stretches on. The universe has handed responsibility back to him. There is no higher authority issuing instructions now. Every decision, whether to forgive Charlie, whether to trust Diego, whether to keep waking up, belongs entirely to him. Freedom, the novel suggests, is heavier than fate. Without the aliens, Henry can no longer blame an external force for his suffering. He must confront the terrifying possibility that meaning is not assigned. It is created. Every small act becomes a declaration. I am still here. I am still trying. And trying is the quiet heroism the book celebrates. The climax of the emotional arc doesn't come with explosions or dramatic speeches. It arrives in moments so small they might be invisible to anyone else. Henry choosing to speak instead of staying silent. Choosing to ask for help instead of pretending he doesn't need it. Choosing to imagine a future even when the past insists on replaying itself. These choices are not cinematic. They are human. The story ultimately reframes the original question. At the beginning, Henry wonders if humanity deserves to be saved. By the end, the question has transformed into something more personal and more profound. Do individual lives deserve patience? Do broken people deserve time to grow? The novel answers not with certainty, but with compassion. Yes, because growth is messy, because healing is uneven, because the alternative is silence. The final tone of the book is not triumph. It is resilience. Henry is not fixed. He is moving. He is learning that survival is not a single victory, but a series of negotiations with despair. Each day he wakes up is a conversation between the part of him that wants to disappear and the part that pressed the button. And the part that pressed the button keeps speaking. The message that lingers after the story ends is deceptively simple and impossibly deep. Life is not justified by perfection. It is justified by potential. By the possibility that tomorrow might contain a moment worth staying for. A laugh. A touch. A breath that doesn't hurt as much as the last one. Henry saves the world, but the true victory is smaller and more radical. He saves himself from the certainty that nothing matters, and in doing so, he discovers the quiet miracle at the center of being human. Even when the universe offers no guarantees, we keep choosing each other. We keep choosing to stay. We keep pressing the button over and over every morning we open our eyes. That is the real science fiction of the story. Not aliens, not cosmic extinction, but the unbelievable fact that fragile, grieving, imperfect people continue to believe life is worth the risk. And that belief is what keeps the world turning. Time does not suddenly become gentle after Henry's choice. It moves the way it always has, uneven, unpredictable, indifferent to human wishes. Some mornings he wakes up and the air feels breathable. Other mornings, the same air feels like water filling his lungs. The novel refuses to pretend that one act of courage rewrites a lifetime of pain. Instead, it shows something more honest. Healing is not a straight road forward. It is a spiral. You revisit the same fears, the same memories, but each time with a slightly different understanding. Henry starts noticing the architecture of his sadness. Before, depression was a fog with no edges. Now it has shape. It has triggers. It has patterns. He begins to recognize how grief disguises itself as anger, how fear disguises itself as indifference. This awareness does not erase the feelings, but it gives him language. And language is power. Naming pain turns it from an endless ocean into something that can at least be mapped. Diego becomes part of that map. Their relationship grows in quiet increments. There are no grand cinematic declarations, no sweeping gestures. Instead, there are shared silences that feel safe. There are conversations that wander through topics most teenagers are taught to avoid. Death, identity, the terror of disappointing the people you love. Diego doesn't treat Henry like a fragile object. He treats him like someone capable of surviving truth. And that trust becomes the foundation of their connection. For Henry, love transforms from a memory of Jesse into a living, breathing risk. Loving Diego does not replace what he lost. The novel is careful about this. It insists that the heart is not a container with limited space. It expands. Jesse's memory remains sacred, but it no longer blocks the door to the future. Instead, it becomes part of the reason Henry understands how precious connection is. Grief teaches him the cost of love. Love teaches him why the cost is worth paying. Meanwhile, the world around him continues revealing its contradictions. School remains a battlefield of social hierarchies and quiet cruelty. Henry watches classmates tear each other down for sport, and the old bitterness resurfaces. The same question echoes in his mind, "This is the species I saved?" But now the question is followed by another observation. For every act of cruelty, there's an act of kindness so small it almost goes unnoticed. A hand steadying a dropped book. A joke meant to lift someone out of embarrassment. A text message asking, "Are you okay?" The novel suggests that humanity is not defined by extremes. It is defined by accumulation. We are the sum of countless minor choices. Every day we vote for the kind of world we want with our behavior, and most of those votes happen in moments too small for history to record. Henry begins to understand that saving the world was not a single event in an alien spacecraft. It is an ongoing responsibility. Not cosmic responsibility, human responsibility. The responsibility to participate in the fragile ecosystem of care that keeps people alive. This realization changes how he sees Audrey. She has always been loud, abrasive, impossible to ignore. But Henry starts noticing the exhaustion behind her sarcasm. The way she carries her own invisible battles. Their friendship deepens when they finally speak honestly about the fear of being left behind. Audrey admits she has been terrified of losing Henry the way he lost Jesse. Her anger, her jokes, her relentless presence, all of it was armor against abandonment. In that confession, the novel exposes another truth. Love often wears disguises. Sometimes it looks like irritation. Sometimes it looks like stubbornness. But underneath is the same desperate plea, "Stay." Charlie's arc reaches its most painful clarity during a moment of unexpected vulnerability. After years of violence and distance, a crack appears in his armor. Henry sees not a monster, but a boy who was never taught how to process his own pain. Charlie's rage is revealed as grief with nowhere to go. This does not excuse the harm he caused. The book does not offer easy forgiveness. Instead, it presents a harder challenge: understanding without erasing accountability. Henry realizes that cycles of hurt survive because they are inherited. They pass from parent to child, from brother to brother, unless someone chooses to interrupt them. Saving the world, on the most intimate level, means refusing to replicate the damage you were given. It means absorbing the impact and deciding it ends with you. That decision is quieter than pressing a cosmic button. But it is just as monumental. As the story moves toward its emotional resolution, Henry confronts the central paradox of existence. Life is unbearable and miraculous at the same time. The same world that killed Jesse also created Diego's smile. The same species capable of violence is capable of tenderness that defies logic. The book does not try to reconcile these contradictions. It insists they coexist. Meaning is born from the tension between them. The absence of the aliens becomes symbolic. They were never the true antagonists. They were a mirror. They forced Henry to externalize a question he was already asking internally. Is this worth it? When they disappear, the mirror shatters, and the question remains. The difference is that Henry now knows the answer is not permanent. It must be chosen repeatedly. Every morning is another button. Every morning is another vote for continuation. The final scenes of the narrative do not promise happiness. They promise motion. Henry stands on the threshold of adulthood with scars that will never fully fade. He still misses Jesse. He still fears losing Diego. He still carries anger toward Charlie. But he also carries a new skill, the ability to hold pain without letting it define the entire landscape of his existence. That is the quiet victory. The novel ends with a sense of open space. The future is not mapped out. There are no guarantees of success or safety. But Henry steps forward anyway. The act of stepping becomes the conclusion. The willingness to engage with uncertainty becomes the triumph. And through Henry, the story speaks directly to the listener. It says that despair is persuasive. It presents arguments that sound logical, even compassionate. It tells you giving up would end the suffering. But the book counters with a radical claim. Suffering is not the opposite of meaning. It is part of the terrain where meaning grows. The presence of pain does not invalidate life. It intensifies the moments that rise above it. We are the ants in the title. Small, fragile, easily crushed by forces we barely understand. From a cosmic perspective, humanity might look insignificant. But insignificance does not equal irrelevance. Ants build colonies. They cooperate. They survive through connection. The metaphor is not about weakness. It is about persistence. The universe may not notice our struggles, but we notice each other. And that is enough to justify continuing. Henry's journey closes on a note that feels less like an ending and more like an invitation. The story hands the listener the same button it handed him. Not a literal device, but a question disguised as a choice. When the weight of existence feels unbearable, will you press forward anyway? The novel does not demand optimism. It asks for courage. The courage to admit life is brutal and beautiful. The courage to stay present inside that contradiction. The courage to believe that even the smallest acts of care ripple outward in ways we cannot measure. The world survives not because it is perfect, but because people keep choosing it. And in that repeated choice lies the heartbeat of the entire story. To live is an act of faith in unfinished possibilities. Henry presses the button once. We press it every day. And every press is a quiet declaration that the story is not over yet. In the end, the story does not fade out with a dramatic conclusion. It exhales. That's the feeling the final stretch leaves behind. An exhale after holding your breath for too long. Henry's life has not become easier, but it has become clearer. The fog that once swallowed every horizon has thinned just enough for him to see a path. Not a perfect path, not a safe one, but a real one. And reality, the novel insists, is more valuable than fantasy. Henry begins to understand that survival is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice, a daily ritual. Some days the ritual is simple: getting out of bed, answering a message, eating a meal. Other days it is monumental: forgiving someone who hurt you, asking for help, admitting you are afraid. The book strips heroism down to its bones and reveals something surprising. Heroism often looks like ordinary persistence. The aliens never return. Their absence becomes the final lesson. No higher power steps in to validate Henry's choice. There is no cosmic reward ceremony. The universe does not clap. It does not whisper approval. It simply continues expanding in cold silence. And within that silence, human voices rise. Laughter in hallways. Arguments at dinner tables. Music through headphones. The messy orchestra of existence. Meaning, the story argues, is not delivered from the outside. It is constructed from the inside. Henry's relationship with Diego settles into something steady and imperfect. They fight. They misunderstand each other. They learn. Love stops being a dramatic rescue and becomes a shared project. To people agreeing over and over to meet in the middle despite their fears. The romance is not presented as a cure. It is presented as companionship in uncertainty. And that distinction matters. No one saves Henry except Henry. Diego walks beside him. That is enough. Audrey remains the gravitational force she has always been. But now Henry meets her energy instead of hiding behind it. Their friendship evolves into honesty without armor. They talk about futures they are scared to imagine. They joke about apocalypse and heartbreak and adulthood with the dark humor of people who understand how fragile everything is. Their bond becomes proof that chosen family can be as vital as blood. Charlie's presence does not disappear into a neat resolution. The wounds between the brothers are too deep for a single conversation to heal. But something shifts. The violence loses its inevitability. There are pauses where there used to be explosions. There are moments where Charlie looks at Henry and sees not a target, but a mirror. Change is slow, uneven, frustrating. The novel refuses a clean redemption arc. Instead, it offers something truer, the possibility of interruption. A cycle faltering, a pattern weakening. Sometimes hope is not a victory. Sometimes it is just a crack in the wall. Henry carries Jesse with him into every new day. The grief never leaves. It changes texture. It becomes less like an open wound and more like a scar he traces when he needs to remember where he has been. Jesse is no longer just a symbol of loss. He becomes part of Henry's motivation to live fully, to feel deeply, to risk connection despite the knowledge that it can end. The book does not argue that pain makes life beautiful. It argues that pain makes beauty visible. Without contrast, joy would be invisible. Without darkness, light would not register as light. Henry's suffering does not justify itself. The story never glorifies trauma. Instead, it shows how humans extract meaning from it, how we build bridges out of broken pieces. Survival is an act of creativity. The title echoes louder in the final moments. We are the ants, small, overlooked, fragile in the face of cosmic forces. From the perspective of the universe, our wars and loves and heartbreaks may look microscopic. But ants build cities beneath the soil. They organize. They carry burdens far larger than their bodies. They survive through cooperation. Their strength is not in size. It is in persistence. Humanity, the novel suggests, survives the same way. Not through grand gestures, through accumulation, through countless small acts of choosing each other. Henry's final emotional state is not happiness in the simple sense. It is willingness, a readiness to participate in life without guarantees. He accepts that the future will contain loss. He accepts that despair will return in waves. But he also accepts that joy will return with equal unpredictability. The balance between them is not something to solve. It is something to inhabit. And that is the ultimate message the story delivers to the listener. You do not have to prove that life is perfect to justify staying. You only have to admit that it is possible. Possible to love again. Possible to fail and try again. Possible to wake up tomorrow and find one moment, just one, that makes the weight bearable. The novel strips away grand philosophical systems and lands on a simple human truth. Continuation is an act of faith. Not faith in destiny. Not faith in cosmic justice. Faith in the unfinished nature of your own story. Henry stands at the edge of that unfinished story and steps forward. The step is quiet. The step is everything. And as the narrative closes, it widens its lens beyond him. His decision becomes a reflection of every listener who has ever stood in the dark and wondered if pressing forward is worth it. The book does not lecture. It does not promise miracles. It extends a hand and says, "You are not strange for asking that question. You are human. To question existence is part of existence. To keep going anyway is the bravest answer we have." The world Henry saved is still messy. It is still unfair. It is still capable of cruelty that makes the choice feel absurd. But it is also capable of tenderness that feels impossible to replace. The story insists that both truths can exist simultaneously without cancelling each other. The presence of horror does not erase the presence of wonder. We live in the tension. We survive in the tension. We find meaning in the tension. And so the final image is not of aliens or buttons or cosmic spectacle. It is of a boy waking up in an ordinary room, sunlight creeping across the floor, choosing, again, to rise and participate in a world that has hurt him and healed him in equal measure. That choice is the quiet miracle at the heart of the novel. Not that humanity was saved once, but that people save it every day by refusing to disappear. The story ends, but the echo remains. Life is heavy. Life is fragile. Life is unbearable and radiant. And still, we press the button. Every morning, every breath, every time we decide to stay. That is what We Are the Ants ultimately gives your listeners. Not answers, but permission. Permission to admit the weight. Permission to feel the doubt. And permission to continue anyway. Because continuing is not weakness. Continuing is the most human thing we do. And that is enough to keep the world turning. Henry saved the world. But the book reminds us of something quieter, something more important. The world is not saved once. It is saved every day by people who wake up carrying invisible weight and choose to continue anyway. No alien ships appear when we press our button. No applause follows survival. There is only the soft, stubborn miracle of another morning and the decision to step into it. That is the courage this story celebrates. Not perfection, not happiness, but persistence. If this story stayed with you, if even a part of Henry's journey felt familiar, then remember this: continuing is not weakness. Continuing is proof that even in darkness, something inside you still believes in light. And that belief is powerful enough to hold up a world. Thank you for listening. This is English Bookshelf, where stories don't just end, they echo.